April 23, 1951, the Kapyong River Valley, Korea. Perched atop Hill 677, the 700 soldiers of the 2nd Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, anxiously watched the army of their South Korean allies retreating below their position, pursued by 20,000 Chinese. 22-year-old Lieutenant Hub Gray was there.
Well, we had been in the line for 30 days, and we came out for a rest. And then suddenly we were warned that we had to move to the front. However, the thrust of the Chinese was much faster than anyone had anticipated. They advanced 40 kilometers in about 36 hours.
3 kilometers across the valley on Hill 504 is the 3rd Battalion Royal Australian Regiment. It would be up to the Canadians and Australians to stop the Chinese juggernaut. Significantly outnumbered, the Battle of Kapyong is about to begin. It would be a small battle with monumental consequences. Korea was the Cold War's first hot conflict. Partitioned after the Second World War at the 38th parallel, the Soviet Union controlled the North and the United States the South. Armed, trained, and prodded by the Soviets, the North invaded the South on June 25, 1950. The South Korean army was overwhelmed and retreated headlong to Busan. The UN Security Council authorized military intervention. In September, the Incheon landings turned the tide. Seoul was recaptured, and legendary U.S. General Douglas MacArthur ordered UN forces to invade the North. In early December, the Chinese intervened and drove the UN forces back across the 38th. Over 25,000 Canadian volunteers fought in Korea, the UN's 3rd largest contingent. 516 would never come home. In early 1951, the 2nd Battalion Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, the PPCLI, landed at Busan. Once again for Canada, they were the first in the field. The ranks were filled with Second World War veterans, notably its rugged commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Stone.
Jim Stone was a fearless individual. When he would come to visit us in the front lines, he would walk on the crest to demonstrate to the troops that he wasn't afraid of the enemy. He was, in my view, a brilliant tactician.
By late April, the PPCLI, or Patricias, were in reserve south of Kapyong. On April 22nd, the Chinese launched a major attack and broke through the UN line north of Kapyong. The Australians and Canadians rushed forward to plug the gap and occupied 2 hills that dominated the narrow entrance to the Kapyong River Valley. If they broke, the road to Seoul would be open. The Aussies were hit first and fought stubbornly. After 24 hours, they were running low on ammunition and withdrew, leaving behind 32 killed and carrying their 59 wounded.
Earlier in the evening, the Australians, they were withdrawing across the river in fighting their withdrawing battle. And company commander asked us to fire on the enemy. We opened fire with our machine guns. We saw the Chinese, remember, we're 3 km apart. They looked like ants crossing the river.
Now it was up to the 700 soldiers of the Patricias, divided into 4 rifle companies. Stone had positioned his soldiers skillfully around the crest of Hill 677. B Company was hit first at 10:50 p.m. The fighting was hand-to-hand, but the Canadians held.
So when they attacked, they would first of all yell like banshees, trying to frighten us. And when they were 100 meters away, it really woke you up, believe me. They would mass their troops on a very small front. They would send in a row of men, 30 to 50 across, 30 meters behind another row, and seemingly unending masses in that way. They all carried a light machine gun. We, on the other hand, had a rifle designed in 1914, single shot, bolt action, the Enfield.
Several hundred Chinese silently infiltrated the Canadian lines. Luckily, Lieutenant Gray saw them coming.
All our companies were in the front of a slope. We were behind a reverse side of the slope, which would have been about 50 meters or 60 meters high. Unbeknown to us, the Chinese sent about 500 men around behind, and they advanced. I happened to notice, as did some of the troops I was with, them coming up the hill as they neared the crest. They didn't make a sound. We could hear nothing. I was detached from the action of the firing of the mortars with 4 half-tracks. Each half-track has 2 machine guns, one 30 caliber and one 50 caliber. As they were approaching the crest, and they were at right angles to us, about 60 yards in front of me, we opened an enfilading fire. As one of my men said, "My God, it looks like somebody took off the top of an anthill." They were scattering.
D Company was attacked next. The 24 men of Lieutenant Mike Levy's 10th Platoon met the waves of Chinese soldiers with bayonets, Bren guns, and grenades. But the Chinese kept coming.
We were very under strength. An infantry platoon in those days had a complement of about 42. Mike Levy's platoon at Dog Company, where he got the intensity of the Chinese attack, was 24.
Around 3 a.m., with the Chinese overrunning his position, Levy radioed "Danger close," signaling the artillery to fire on his position.
The Chinese were within 7 meters of Mike's position in Massa, that he ordered his men to hunker down, and he brought the fire twice, these barrages on his own troops.
The deadly barrages lasted 40 minutes, and thousands of rounds rained down. By sunup, the Chinese attack stopped. Miraculously, Levy's platoon suffered no casualties from the bombardment.
The artillery support is what saved our bacon. I believe that Mike Levy was probably responsible for saving my life.
Running low on food and ammo, an airdrop resupplied the Patricias, but the Chinese were gone. The PPCLI had held. The Battle of Kapyong was over. Incredibly, the Patricia's losses were 10 killed and 23 wounded. Chinese casualties were estimated at over 1,000. It was the last major Chinese offensive of the war, a war that dragged on until 1953. U.S. President Harry Truman awarded the Patricias a Presidential Unit Citation for Kapyong, the first Canadian unit to be so honored. But what is the battle's legacy to the Patricias who were there?
I keep fighting the war. I keep thinking about my dead comrades and those of us who are left. It's something that I just can't get rid of. I very often think of it as the enemy's vengeance. You never know exactly when it's going to arrive or when it comes, but it's always there, and you almost never discuss it with your own family. So it's a burden you carry silently within.
We honor those who survived and remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice in Korea, the land of the morning calm. They are truly monumental Canadians.